If you would like to support the channel, please consider becoming a patron on Patreon. More information in the description below. Primordial Earth belonged to the ancients and the beings which served them. They were unbound from physics, nature, purpose, and ethics. There were 5 ancients in total, yet only 4 of them were known, and of those 4, 3 existed in perpetual stalemate. Should one of them try to seize power, another of the ancients could dominate over them, who could also be dominated by the next ancient. For one of the 3 to campaign against the others was a nigh guarantee that they were delivering a victory to another of their brethren. Take, for example, the great ancient called Ulyaoth. Ulyaoth was aligned to magical energies, a master of the planes and interdimensional travel. Ulyaoth's ethereal might could only be undone by the madness of the Ancient One called Xel'lotath. Little was unknowable to Xel'lotath, who weaponized insanity as finely as a surgeon's scalpel. She could read the minds of others and with the mere power of suggestion make them do anything she desired. But even Xel'lotath could be countered. One of them was immune to her. Her undoing would be the rage-filled ancient called Chattur'gha. His methods were violent, his strength unmatched. What planning did he need when he could so simply destroy any obstacle set before him? But if he moved against the other ancients, the magics of Ulyaoth would tear him apart. The 4th of the known Ancient Ones existed outside the power checks of the Triad. He is called Mantorok, and while he's not weak to any of the 3, neither is he strong. He is a neutral force against all, who could never topple them, but Mantorok was wise and patient. Maintaining the balance of power between these 4 was paramount to all. And the 5th of them, their golden powers, their true nature, motivations, name, none of it was known. It was one of the great mysteries of the universe. For inscrutable reasons, the great Mantorok acted against the 3. How he did it is unfathomable, but Mantorok imprisoned the other 3. They were banished to where they could not reach Earth, and all that remained of them were their essences. It would take planetary alignment and a powerful spell to bring any one of them back. That's not to say they couldn't influence beings on Earth, though. The world changed, evolved, humanity was born and matured, sects and cities dedicated themselves to worshipping one of the 3 ancients. They desired to bring one of them back to Earth to rule. They sought to do this through rituals and sacrifices. These were dark, evil practices, and each successful sacrament performed by these beings brought the world and humanity closer to domination and destruction. Within an ancient city called Enga, something terrible happened, which would set Earth on a crash course with doom. A summoning was successful. 9 massive ritual pillars around the city were used to make it possible. One of the 3 ancients was given a way to directly influence the world, though in a very limited capacity. The chosen Ancient One sent their minions into the city of Enga, and all within were slaughtered. It became a cursed place, where it was said that the blood of those killed still flowed through the streets. The essences of the 3 imprisoned gods were locked away deep underground in ancient Persia within a forbidden city. The only way in was via a magic spell. Minions of Mantorok patrolled the underground passages to keep out all who might chance upon it, or, worse, all who might seek the essence of an Ancient One. Through the coming centuries, the magics and mythologies of the Ancient Ones faded away. Mantorok retained a physical presence in the world, within a temple called Angkor Thom, in what we would know today as Cambodia. He became known as the Corpse God, and was heralded as a god of fertility, yet being near him caused so much fear, so unrelenting, that entire villages were torn apart by it. Eventually, Angkor Thom, the resting place of Mantorok, was abandoned and left uninhabitable. Ages of planning finally met opportunity in 26 BC, when a Roman centurion named Pius Augustus heard the call of an imprisoned Ancient One. Pius was a renowned warrior and masterful strategist. His talents were praised by his fellow soldiers, who believed that following Pius's tactics guaranteed them victory. The Romans were invading ancient Persia, for their emperor desired an artifact believed to be hidden away in the region. Pius did not speak confidently of its existence, but he did not doubt the emperor's belief or the clarity of their orders. When Pius was alone, he heard a voice calling to him, ushering him on towards them. And the fearless centurion followed the voice. which took him to a ring of strange rune-inscribed stones. He stepped into the circle of stones, and Pius Augustus experienced magic. He was teleported underground into the Forbidden City. Pius's bravery compelled him into the dark labyrinth. Immediately following his plunge, Pius faced the lesser minions of Mantorok. Even these lesser beings, they defied everything that Pius knew of the world. They were as walking corpses. His armor and weapon gave him the advantage, though. Even as lesser minions gave way to stronger ones, Pius continued to cut his way through the mysterious labyrinth. He found strange blocks of granite with more runes inscribed into them, yet each of them seemed to glow with intentional hues: red, green, blue, and purple. And he came to find that they served a purpose here. They kept locked away the final way forward. Pius could perhaps leave this place. He could find a way out, leave the secrets buried here to rot, but he chose not to. He trekked through the underground and found every ruined block needed to unlock what lay at the end of this place. What met him first was a statue of himself. But how could that be? Furthermore, a note was left here. Pius, you must prove your worth by destroying the statue. He hesitated only for a few moments before turning his sword on it, and surprisingly, the metal didn't just bounce off the stone. It destroyed it in segments. One by one, each limb cut off further opened the door before him until nothing remained of the statue of Pius Augustus. In the next room, minions of Mantorok attacked, leaving the man at death's door by the end of the fight. He could still turn back. He doesn't have to continue this delve. But Pius presses a button in the room, activating a magical circle and sealing the door out. There's no escaping this now. Pius steps into the circle but finds himself in a place that's nigh inconspicuous in its simplicity. It's a plain hallway which leads to a small open room with 3 pedestals about it. Atop each one is an item, one green, one blue, and one red. Pius is given no direction or insight. He cannot leave. All he can do is observe and decide. Which one will he touch? One resembles a mysterious red-clawed worm. The next, a delicate and gracefully floating dome. And finally, a green effigy resembling a warped angel. Having no context, Pius touches the relic that calls to him, the red-clawed worm sculpture. The centurion is hit with power from the red sculpture. It feeds into him, forces its way in, brings him to his knees, and finally kills him. Pius Augustus will rise again, continue on in name, but as an entirely new being. He has unwittingly submitted himself to the Ancient One called Chaturga, the same Ancient One whose minions destroyed Enga, and for it, he was granted the god's gift of strength. He too gained enslavement. Pius entered the service of the god. There was no other fate that he could meet, even if he wanted to. But in this new form, all Pius desired was to carry out the will of his new master. Chaturga wished to return to Earth. It would take hundreds of years of preparation, but before Chaturga could even be ushered back to Earth, Mantorok needed to be dealt with. Knowledge of Chaturga's sudden advantage over the other 2 ancients wasn't lost on them. The mad god Zelatath could not stand against him, for she was vulnerable to his unthinking rage. But Ulyaoth, the blue magical being, he could oppose Chaturga. It was a risk because if Zelatath attacked Ulyaoth after Chaturga was handled, then she would win dominion over Earth. But what choice was there? To not act was to hand Chaturga everything. So from the shadows, one of the 4 ancient ones began to plot. In 565 AD, planning met opportunity once again, this time in favor of Ulyaoth. A young swordsman named Karim was asked of a woman named Chandra, whom he obsessed over, to find a relic in the desert for her. Chandra told him that for weeks she dreamed of an ancient treasure which could change life around it. She challenged Karim to prove his love for her by finding it, and so he, enthralled by her, readily agreed to do so. Chandra spoke as though she cared little for Karim. Her entire focus was on that relic, but that didn't matter to him. She vowed to await his return, and he departed for a journey into the desert, in hopes of winning Chandra's heart. Karim eventually found himself standing before a circle of rock pillars, which Pius Augustus too once beheld long ago. A voice called to him, and the swordsman obediently walked into the center of the stone circle. He was taken down into the remains of the Forbidden City. Others had come before Karim. There were corpses of men all about the halls of the underground labyrinth. Each of them had died violent deaths. Their armor did little to protect them here. Too, here are the bodies of monstrous skeletal beings which Karim has never seen the likes of before. When the young man descends into the depths, he doesn't find himself in an expected claustrophobic hallway. Instead, he's taken someplace inexplicable. It looks like a mausoleum with only a narrow bridge across it, and the statues of two strangely dressed people alongside it. One is named Elia, and the other is named Anthony. Each other statue pedestal is broken, but who are these two souls? At the end of the walkway is a book, resting atop a gnarled, hand-shaped altar. The damned thing tenses and it flexes when Karim approaches, but the book is sinister to its core. Bound in human skin, decorated with bone. Karim felt compelled to take it, so he did. And he saw flashes of an ancient soldier, of a lich being, of the woman Elia, the man Anthony, and the corpse of a king. Their clothing and environments were so strange, as though from completely different points in time, moving forward and looping back to meet Karim here in 525 AD. The book is the Tome of Eternal Darkness, a creation of Mantorok, and Karim finding the Ancient One's book was absolutely no happenstance. Mantorok is making moves of his own in a cosmic scheme. Within the book, Karim finds 2 pages already filled out. They contain magical spells that he may now use for himself. So too recorded here are the stories of the 2 other people, Elia and Anthony. For anyone else, these pages would be maddening and unreadable. But Karim has been chosen to use the tome and everything within it. He may safely carry it on himself. He is expelled from this strange pocket dimension back to the real world, back to the Forbidden City, where the minions of Chattur'gha are rising. For Karim to be a truly suitable choice for what's to come, he must be able to reach the bottom of this place otherwise unaided. The labyrinth is so much worse than it was in Pius's era. Mantorok's minions were the Centurion's foes. However, now, since Pius joined forces with and opened the world up to Chattur'gha's power, these beings reflect that shift. They hit twice as hard and are harder to kill. A brutal combo. Karim's journey through the Forbidden City is horrific. Several times he's brought to death's door, and the madness of it all drains his literal sanity. At times he hears things that aren't there, sees things that don't exist. He imagines terrible things happening to his own body. After a long, hard-fought search, Karim finds his ultimate goal. And remember when I said fortune favored Ulyaoth? Well, the artifact before Karim is the essence of Zelatath. She is weak to the rage of Chattur'gha. If these 2 ancients fought, then Chattur'gha would be the victor, and Ulyaoth would in turn battle Chattur'gha to claim all for himself. All Karim needs to do is touch the essence of Zelatath to make that possible. But there is an interference. The soul of Chandra appears before Karim. If made possible by the warden Mantorok is unknown, but her presence here betrays that something terrible happened. She tells Karim that she did not keep her promise to wait for him. She was to be with a nobleman, but his mistress hated Chandra. She was cut and flayed to death. Chandra now understands what the artifact she wanted is, and it's something that no human should possess. She asks him to join her in death, to become something more, just like she has. Though their reunion is a toxic and strange one, he agrees. They will be together forever in death, acting as the guardians of this relic. Until ones chosen by fate arrive, none will possess this essence. In 814 AD, 249 years after the death of Karim, the undead Pius Augustus stood before a portal to his master Chattur'gha. In the hundreds of years since Pius was blessed with Chattur'gha's power from the Ancient One's essence, he's grown weaker, and he will continue to do so until Chattur'gha is returned to Earth. Pius fears that Mantorok will interfere with their plans, but the headstrong Chattur'gha refuses to even entertain the idea. They must find a way to handle Mantorok before Chattur'gha can return. They've been plotting a way to bind the Great One beneath his temple, turn the warden into a prisoner. They know that the corpse god has entrusted one of its hearts to a servant of his own, who protects it from all others in death. It contains immense power from Mantorok, and it is feared by the Ancient Ones. Even if they imprisoned or killed Mantorok, that heart could be their doom if wielded by the right being. But Chattur'gha insists that it doesn't matter. He's too powerful to be overcome by Mantorok. Their plan will not change, so responsibility for handling Mantorok will fall upon Pius himself. These Ancient Ones thrive on chaos in the world, and right now, a man called Charlemagne the Frank is threatening that chaos. Charlemagne was uniting much of Western Europe under the Holy Roman Empire. Chattur'gha wants the emperor assassinated. These reforms and peace cannot stand. Pius assures him that Charlemagne's death is imminent. In France, nearby the Oubliette Cathedral, human agents working for Pius are carrying out that assassination via a magical scroll. A messenger of the emperor, a young man named Anthony, is entrusted with the scroll, and he's told that only Charlemagne may open it. But that shadowy man's insistence and off-putting demeanor made Anthony suspicious, so he ducked into an alcove and he opened the scroll to see what it said. Anthony was hit with a spell so powerful that it knocked him off his feet. He was cursed, but with what he did not know. All he could think was that his emperor, there were people that wished him dead, and Anthony knew that he had to warn Charlemagne. The monks at Oubliette Cathedral tell Anthony that Charlemagne is within the visiting chambers, currently speaking with the bishop. Some of them seem docile, but he cannot tell if it's out of respect or out of fear. The reason for this lies at the end of the main hall. One of the monks has been killed. There have been several deaths at the cathedral lately, and the most recent was because a man fell from a tower. These sorrowful, terrified monks are waiting for Charlemagne and the bishop to end their meeting so they can begin funeral rites. Anthony opens the casket of the dead monk, and they all see that something foul has happened to the body. It's as though he's been defiled. His chest cavity is wide open, like something burst out of it. One of the monks gives Anthony a sword to carry so that he might protect himself from any evil within the church, and he asks him to speak with the bishop about this immediately, even if that means interrupting the meeting between the holy man and the emperor. The door to the visiting chamber is locked, and no one responds to Anthony's presence at the door, yet he can hear talking behind it. He must trek through the cathedral to find the bishop's key, but atop his first flight of stairs, Anthony is swept away to that pocket dimension. He's within the same tomb-like structure that Karim went to, except this time, the only statue is of the young woman named Elia. And at the end of the walkway is the Tome of Eternal Darkness. Not knowing where he is, what's going on, and with no other options before him, Anthony picks up the book. He sees flashes of an ancient soldier, of the strange woman Elia, and then he is returned to the real world. He can now read and cast spells from the tome, but only one page is available to him. The Story of and Spells Discovered by Elia. When Anthony regains himself in the real world, the effects of the scroll's curse begin. He starts to rot. He does not stop though. Anthony continues on through the church, solving puzzles that block his way forward, eventually encountering the foul monstrosities of Chattur'gha. They drain his sanity, keep runes away from him, deal immense damage with each hit. Anthony is not a trained fighter like Pius or Karim, but he does not back down. He slowly cuts his way through the secrets of the cathedral and adds his obtained knowledge of runes and spells to the Tome of Eternal Darkness. It will be useful for its future wielders. A monk Anthony saves in the hidden tunnels discloses that he believes the bishop to be demonic. And to accompany this newfound fear of the bishop himself, the walls start to bleed. With each new hallway, each new challenge, Anthony's health deteriorates. It's not long before his skin is cracked and gray. By the end of his search, the poor man can barely stand. He cuts down a corrupt agent of Pius in the depths of the cathedral, who stood before a shrine to an ancient and evil god. And from him, he takes the bishop's key. Anthony slowly hobbles and fights his way back up to the surface, his sanity pushed to its limits just as his body, but he makes it to Charlemagne. He is too late, however. Charlemagne lies dead. When the scroll curse failed to reach the emperor, another plan was carried out. And Anthony, his time is up. The curse set upon him finally brings him to death's door. As he dies, one of the black-clad men laments that he was a fool to try to save Charlemagne. for his fate had been decided centuries ago. Nothing will save them from the power of Chattur'gha. For another 3 centuries, Pius worked out a spell which would bind Mantorok. Chattur'gha was not a strong planner, so that responsibility widely fell to Pius, and it was a responsibility he happily undertook. By 1150 AD, he was ready. He traveled to the abandoned lands around the great temple called Angkor Thom, and he sought out the corpse god. But someone else wasn't far behind, a young woman named Elia. She was born into servitude and worked as a dancer in the court of a king, and somehow, she'd gotten her hands on Mantorok's special book, the Tome of Eternal Darkness. Furthermore, she's reading from it with no issue. Pius Augustus carries out his centuries-long plotted scheme. He casts a powerful spell, driving pillars through the limbs of Mantorok, ensuring that the corpse god will never physically be able to leave. And then he finishes his ritual with a holding spell. Mantorok has been imprisoned in Angkor Thom, and without him to hold back the other ancients, their return will simply be a matter of time. While Pius taunts the corpse god deep underground, Elia dreams of having a fantastic adventure all her own. Little does she know just what sort of a journey she's about to embark on. The doors to the temple close, sealing her inside. Elia decides to delve into the temple to see if she can find another exit. She's come here with a weapon and knows how to protect herself. She's going to need it for all the minions of the ancients strewn about this temple. Elia doesn't realize just how grave the danger is here, yet. This place is riddled with traps. A misstep could mean an axe through the head or a poison dart in the ass. And deeper into the top level of the temple, she is made aware that the dead on the ground aren't going to be staying down. They are so frightening that they drain her sanity, but Elia fights back viciously against everything that rises up. A series of halls and puzzles later, she's dropped deep into the underground. The only way she can go now is down. Old murals depict interesting interactions between a demonic-looking skeletal figure who suspiciously looks like Pius and the Khmer people that once lived here. The skeletal being turned the people away from their god of fertility, Mantorok. Another depicts the skeletal demon torturing and killing one of the Khmer deities, which appears to have possibly been a part of Mantorok. Or it's a prophetic depiction of something that would come to pass. After scraping her way through the damned halls of this temple, when she's near the limits of her sanity, Elia comes face to face with the supposed god of fertility, who is being overseen by 2 guards. 2 men that Mantorok readily consumes. The corpse god wants Elia here, and they tried to interfere. Pius shows himself again, mocks Mantorok for being reduced to eating human flesh, and he savors the fact that for the next millennia, Mantorok will fester and suffer here as a shadow of his true self. And Pius does not strike down Elia, despite her clear intrusion. He warns her to leave, lest she becomes food for the corpse god. But after the departure of Pius, Mantorok makes his move. He does not allow Elia to simply walk out. He strikes her with his power, and once she wakes again, a messenger of the god comes to her. He tells her that she is chosen to fight the Eternal Darkness. She will leave with a gift and an obligation. The gift is her life, and the obligation is to take one of Mantorok's hearts. She must protect it from all who seek it. She will be one of many who will join this fight in the coming centuries, and they will all have to play their part to the fullest. For Mantorok, for the corpse god, for his schemes and his wants, a notion that is left completely unsaid. When posed as a fight against an ancient evil, what human would question or reject that call? They want to defeat the Eternal Darkness, no? Elia takes the heart into her own body, which is a death sentence. She limps back through the temple to get the exit behind Mantorok open, and then at her journey's end, faces Pius. He warned her. He told her to run, and she didn't listen. He raises his voice at her, demands to know where the essence of Mantorok is, the heart that she took into herself, but Elia refuses to answer. With what almost sounds like regret in his voice, Pius uses the power of Chattur'gha to kill Elia. But in death, her mission will continue on. She will remain in Angkor Thom in spirit to eternally guard the heart. For the next 300 years, Pius Augustus and his minions carried out rituals and spells to prepare for Chattur'gha's return and to make their master's presence on Earth stronger. Pius traveled to Persia under the guise of a warlord named Tamerlane. He conquered much of the country and began collecting victims for a new project, the Pillar of Flesh. Its base would settle within the Forbidden City itself, where Pius once claimed the essence of Chattur'gha, where the ghost of Karim and Chandra dwelled, guarding the essence of Zelatath. Zelatath, who was weak against Chattur'gha, could still be a pure force of chaos in this world. A conflict between Chattur'gha and Zelatath would end in her demise, which Uliauth could capitalize upon by destroying Chattur'gha. It was a relic that had to be kept safe and secret no matter the cost. The Pillar of Flesh would be a grand and powerful ritual site, dedicated to Chattur'gha. And as the name might suggest, its construction included humans in the foundation. By now, the little mercy Pius had tried to extend to Elia was dust. He was truly a brutal demon. In 1460 AD, a Venetian architect named Roberto Bianchi found himself imprisoned by the warlord Tamerlane. Roberto had been traveling this part of the world, seeking inspiration, but while in custody of the warlord, he was ordered to lead the construction of the pillar. It had to be perfect, and there were few more qualified to see to such a task than Roberto Bianchi. When planning was far enough along and Bianchi was really no longer needed, he was given one more task: inspect the foundation of the pillar. Whether he survived the journey through the Forbidden City didn't seem to be of high importance. He was unceremoniously thrown into a pit leading down the construction paths and issued harsh orders by Pius's underlings, with a vague, unreassuring promise that if he was quick about it, they might drag him out of the hole. Bianchi was not a fighter, nor was he quick or able to take many hits. His survival would be a painful process, and he's not alone down here. Workers nervously move about the underground, some outright terrified or desperate to just make it home to their families. Roberto comes face to face with demons not long into his surveying job. Rather than fight them, he opts mostly to run around them. Getting into a fight is just too risky. From site to site he goes, taking notes of areas around the complex that might need reinforced, dodging or fighting off the demons in the tunnels once properly armed, cutting down workers who have been taken over by them. A confusing event adds to the terror of the architect. He is taken to a strange place that seems from another world, where a large tome wrapped in skin awaits him. Bianchi has been chosen, and will be the next to wield the Tome of Eternal Darkness. He sees flashes of people in different states of adventure, some at the moments of their death, in times out of sequence from places he doesn't recognize. Who are those people, and why are they linked to this book? He may now proceed through the Forbidden City with a number of powerful spells at his disposal. Though he is still in grave danger at every turn, it will maximize his chances of surviving this. Those who didn't have this advantage start piling up. The corpses of workers are all over the lower levels, closer to the foundation. The combination of it all starts to take a toll on Roberto. This place is an inhuman nightmare. The addition of healing spells from the book pulls him back over and over, in particular a purple one, which seems to heal both body and mind. At a dead end is a small room, with 3 altars set in a circle around it. It looks so plain, yet when Roberto drew in, another miraculous thing happened. The spirit of a young man appeared to him. He ordered Roberto to stop, to venture no further, or he would kill him. It is Karim, and not far away is Chandra, the guardians of the Forbidden City. Karim tells him that only those who are chosen may enter this place, and he brings his blade down upon Roberto Bianchi, to find that it passes right through him. This is the one that Karim has been waiting for. He reassures Roberto that though he may be confused, answers will come in time, just as they did for him. This finally means that Karim can rest. His vigil is over. Karim and Chandra finally fade from this world together, and left behind for Roberto is that terrible relic, the essence of Zelatath. He claims it, but he does not physically touch it. He wraps it in cloth. Even not knowing what this thing truly is, he can sense that it's maddening and dangerous. This, too, is the final place Bianchi must survey before leaving this damned place. He wonders if this small room was the purpose for the pillar being built here. But now all that remains is backtracking to the surface. He must report to the warlord all of his findings. He may yet survive this day. The warlord Tamerlane, who in truth was Pius Augustus, took Roberto's report himself. and when told that the Foundation was infested with demons and devils, it didn't stop anything. Construction would continue as planned, thanks to Bianchi's reports. The architect's reward would be knowledge. He would come to understand why the Forbidden City was built here, what lies beneath it, where monstrosities of Chattur'gha will be brought into the world, where powerful rituals will take place. The demons and devils Roberto is warning of is precisely why construction will continue. And to ensure Bianchi understands this, he will be part of the Pillar's foundation as well. Roberto was placed last in the line of sacrifices. He watched as one by one innocent people were thrown down into the Pillar. The horrific prayer of Tamerlane accompanied their cries and their pleading. Nothing gave the man pause. And when it was Bianchi's turn, the warlord gave a few words before the architect was pushed to his death. When the Pillar of Flesh was finally completed, the bodies and faces of its many victims were outlined in its walls. The moments of their deaths captured forever, and Roberto Bianchi was no exception. However, while that was the end of his life, it was not the end of his spirit. Like Karim before him, Roberto Bianchi would guard the essence of Zelatath in death. Someday, one would come who could take the relic on the next step of its journey, but until that day, the architect lingered on in the Forbidden City. This video is supported by patrons on Patreon, YouTube members, and Twitch subs. See the warlord. See how she eats with grace and power. We must feed the warlord. If you wish to feed the warlord, consider becoming a patron on Patreon, a YouTube member, or a Twitch sub. Get access to supporter-only streams, a private Discord channel, early content, and the satisfaction of feeding your warlord. If you would like to feed the warlord, check the description for more information. And now, the warlord must sleep. Back to the lore. "15 years after the death of Roberto Bianchi in Persia, a monk named Paul Luther in the region called Amiens in France found himself in a dilemma. The year was 1485 AD, the era of the Inquisition and the witch hunts. The traveling monk could not leave the Amiens region because the entire area was put under martial law, no one in or out until all the witches were found. Paul Luther was held up in the Oubliette Cathedral, but this was to his favor, for at the Oubliette Cathedral was a sacred relic called the Hand of Jude that he wished to see. About 600 years prior, Charlemagne the Frank died here. The young man named Anthony tried to save the emperor, but he was killed by the curse which was meant for Charlemagne. The man that meets Paul Luther is welcoming but also strangely ominous. He says that many have risked their lives to see the sacred relic, and he encourages Paul to not say anything about it to the inquisitors. Best to keep things within the cathedral's secret from the fanatics, right? Though this man is a part of the Inquisition, and he tells Paul that there is surely deviancy afoot in Amiens, he doesn't seem to want the inquisitors coming around the church to investigate anything. While exploring the now well-built-out and gorgeous cathedral, Paul Luther is bothered by the lack of sacraments or adornments on the altars. While it is a church, it seems bereft of actual holiness, and the corpse in the pews doesn't alleviate his concerns. A man looks as though he was torn apart from the inside out, and the responders to Paul's cries for help aren't guards but clergymen. The head figure of them is called Augustine, who sounds quite a bit like Pius Augustus. He outright accuses Paul of being involved in this devilry, so he is to be suspect number one. Paul Luther will be confined to the cathedral and questioned later, under Augustine's orders. He is taken to a back room within the church and locked inside, and he's alone for a while, left to fester in his own fear of what is to come, until a kindly custodian comes to see him. The man tells Paul Luther that he intends to free him and warns him of deviousness amidst the monks here. He doesn't want Paul to end up like the others. The dead man, Brother Andrew, was killed to protect some kind of a secret. The custodian knows that the dead monk made several entries into his journal about it. There might be answers to all of this within. but he encourages Paul Luther to run, to flee this place. But since this man insists on staying to solve this mystery, the custodian will help him out. After Paul Luther searches for the journal, he can find this kindly man in the bell tower. Hopefully by then, he'll have a key to get him deeper into the cathedral. Now alone, Paul Luther goes to leave his once makeshift prison cell, only to be pulled into the other dimension of Mantorok, where the tome of Eternal Darkness lies. He has been chosen, which too means his fate has been sealed. When he takes it, he sees the flashes of many other lives from different points in history. It's quick, out of sequence, and confounding. So many people, such strange alien places, but it's over quickly. He returns to the Oubliette Cathedral with a grave task set before him: uncover the secrets of the holy men here. In the basement of the church, Paul Luther finds a guest bedroom, and within, proof that the supposed holy relics stored here throughout the years were all forgeries. They were used to lure people to the cathedral. Their tithes and gifts padded the vaults of the church. It was acknowledged as the utmost heresy. Upon further inspection of the room, Paul is chilled when he observes how unused it is, and that he didn't see quarters for the few other monks around the cathedral. This furthers his fear because the only man that doesn't need a bed is a dead one. In the bell tower, the custodian gives Paul Luther a key to the old tower of the complex. It's been sealed off since the Inquisition arrived here. There are sure to be more answers within, and the custodian will do everything he can to help Brother Luther through this. Monstrosities of Chatturga are spied by Paul Luther as he proceeds. He sees them rise from the dead, force their ways into the bodies of men to use as puppets. He finds evidence that the death of Brother Andrew had been prepared in advance, which further churns his suspicions directly towards Augustine himself, having some hand in a sort of scheme here. Just how many brothers of the cathedral have been killed thus far? Within the very room where Charlemagne the Frank died long ago, the shambling corpse of a young man is imprisoned. Poor Anthony, who has within his eye socket something that Paul Luther needs to proceed. The long-dead would-be hero climbs to his feet and shambles towards Paul Luther, intent on killing the man. After a long and very personal fight, Anthony is finally given rest. Paul Luther prays over him, and when he touches the body, he sees flashes of Anthony's final hours while trying to save Charlemagne. From the eye socket, Paul takes the item he requires, and so too does he take the weapon that Anthony once wielded. The diary pages of the dead Brother Andrew cue Paul Luther into the suspicions the man had about the practices carried out here. He doubted any of it was holy. He rather thought the people here to be strange, and their lack of prayer and proper routine very much caught his attention. Despite searching every inch of the cathedral's upper levels, Paul Luther cannot find any way forward in his investigation, not until he happens to find a hollow wine casket in the basement. He finds that the barrel's spigot is the opening mechanism for a wall, leading him down into the depths beneath the church, where things harshly escalate. He contends with rooms full of walking corpses, massive beasts blocking his way forward. His fleeting sanity heightens his fear. But Mantorok chose wisely with Brother Paul Luther. He survives, he fights, he uses the Tome of Eternal Darkness, and adds his own magical discoveries to it as well. Upon a blasphemous shrine deep underground, dedicated to an unholy god, Paul Luther finds another of Brother Andrew's diary pages, placed here by the man himself before he was killed. Here, in France, beneath the Oubliette Cathedral, is the final relic of the Ancient Ones, the essence of Uliauth, the one who could conquer Chatturga. The many holy symbols used to lure people here over the years wasn't just for money. Those people were used as sacrifices, and it was Augustine who led it all. This is a powerful testimony, and just the proof he needs to bring the true Inquisition crashing down upon Augustine and his supposed monks. Paul Luther meets back with the custodian and shares with him every bit of information that he's uncovered, including the truth behind the holy relics used to lure people here so they could be sacrificed. The custodian shares that when he awoke that morning, a terrible dagger had been placed on his pillow. He knew that it meant his days were numbered, and he asks Paul to take the dagger away so he doesn't have to look at it anymore. Then they part ways one last time. Once Paul Luther has gone from the room, a minion of Chatturga appears behind the custodian and seizes him, taking him away from the bell tower into the darkness of an unknown depth. Paul Luther descends back under the church to find out more about the strange cult that has infiltrated these grounds. Perhaps he can find Augustine himself and put a stop to all of this. He comes across an odd stone sarcophagus in the corner of a room with the effigy of a man that looks exactly like the custodian. A message orders him to plunge a weapon into the statue's chest to sacrifice his friend. Paul Luther does so, not thinking that it could cause any harm, but he hears the terrible scream of a man ring out from behind a hidden pathway when he does it. It unlocks his way forward, but at what cost? Beyond this door, Paul Luther finds his friend, lying upon an altar, the most recent, brutal sacrifice. He now feels truly lost and alone with the death of his only ally here. Still under the guise of Augustine, Pius approaches Paul and taunts him. All this time he's been in a pit of vipers, surrounded by heresy. But even if he had left the cathedral, Augustine would have made sure Paul did so as a fugitive of the Inquisition. He promises the holy man that he is going to die a terrible death here in the name of Chaturga. He leaves Paul Luther to fight his way out of the room, knowing that it's only a matter of time before he meets his end. Intent on stopping this heresy, Paul Luther does follow Augustine through the underground. It leads him to an ornate door, behind which is palpable evil. He can still turn around and leave, take his chances with the Inquisition, but in a grand display of bravery, Paul Luther opens the door. In any other place, this hall may have seemed beautiful. The statues were sinister, alien, and hinted terrible stories, but there was a grace to it all as well. This den of evil was almost magical, and it all began to shake before the growling began. Paul Luther could only manage his footing and wait, while the ground moved beneath him and the sounds of something large and full of rage approached. Through the foundation, the Guardian of Chaturga emerges. It laughs at the idea that this puny man before him wishes to do combat, but that's not to say it's unwilling to do so. Pius Augustus finally drops his disguise and addresses the Guardian, reminding him that he's here to keep safe this place. Pius will see that Paul Luther is taken care of. But that is not to be the brother's fate. The Guardian crushes Paul Luther, turning him into a pile of gore with a single hit from his arm. Pius will not dictate how this creature will guard this place, even if he does so out of respect. The Guardian will act as he sees fit at every decision. After all, who better to guard the essence of Chaturga's greatest threat and foe? Who better to keep safe the essence of Uliauth? 75 years later, in 1760 AD, Dr. Maximilian Roivas was pulled into the chaos of the Ancient Ones. It was his father, Aaron Roivas, that set him up for it, but it was Max's tenacity and curiosity that sealed the deal. His wife had passed some years ago, but he kept busy by giving lectures at universities around the United States. After his father, Aaron, passed, Maximilian inherited the family's mansion in Rhode Island. Though there were servants all about the grounds, he was a solitary man who mostly kept to himself. His 3 adult children had their own lives to live, but they worried about their father's isolation. They visited from time to time, though they never stayed for long. It gave Maximilian ample time to get into mischief. He intended to make the mansion his new home and to uncover every secret within it. He was sure that there was more to this place than met the eye. Max found letters from his father to an unknown party discussing a copy of something called the Tome of Eternal Darkness. His father did not believe the tome to be authentic, yet he could not read it, nor could any scholar it was presented to. His father kept the strange tome within the mansion someplace, where it would be safe. Even if it was a copy, in the wrong hands it could be a powerful weapon. In another letter written by his father, Aaron spoke of abandoning the house as it had been forsaken by the ancients and taking the Tome of Eternal Darkness along. On this particular night, Max walks about the mansion, picking apart every nook and cranny of it. But it's not until he reaches a back dining room area that he finds something of interest. A series of plaques set upon the fireplace mantel, which turns out to be a puzzle. Solving it reveals to Max one of his father's many secrets, a hidden passage through the fireplace. Inside the room it leads to is a powerful spell scroll, a melee weapon, and upon the desk is a strange leather-bound book. It is the Tome of Eternal Darkness, though speculated by Aaron Roivas to merely be a copy. When Max touches it, however, he is accosted by the flashes of images from other wielders of the tome before him. He sees Pius, Elia, Anthony, and Kareem. There is no sign of Roberto the architect or Brother Paul Luther. At this point in the story, they have not yet interacted with it, though their lives have already passed. Such is the power of Mantorok. The flow of time is irrelevant to him. It's not known how Max's father came to possess this book, but that Mantorok did not reclaim it and take it back to his pocket dimension means it either is a true copy, or the ancient god has particular plans for the Roivas family. Perhaps both, though the latter is more likely. Once Max has the tome, the devils of Chaturga start appearing all about the mansion as though invited to do so. A letter written by his father Aaron drops out of the tome, and it details the ruins of a city called Enga lying beneath the mansion. His father knew the name Chaturga, knew that his minions were close, and he feared it. There was a passage to the corpse city in the basement, and Aaron wished for it all to be destroyed. He could feel his life fading away, that whatever ailed him was worsening by the day. He died before the letter could be delivered. That passage is still in the basement. Max fights his way through his home, killing demons and the servants possessed by them. As a doctor, he can perform quick autopsies on each of the monsters that he kills. It allows him to determine their weaknesses, their powers, and strength. He gives each of them names and records it all in the Tome of Eternal Darkness. This information may be of use to any future users of the book. Following instructions jotted down by his father in his notes, Max locates the key to the basement and then claws his way through the halls of his home to it. The good doctor seems very well trained in the use of swords and guns. He's formidable in melee, and he can shoot things in the face if he can get a jump on them. His sanity does start to take some major hits. He hears babies crying, the walls bleed, the main room of the house flips upside down for a while. But this is leading him to the answers he so deeply desires. The way under the mansion is through the well in the basement. He descends it without a second thought. There is no other option to him. He has to know the truth. A short ways down a flight of stairs, Max glimpses something that he cannot explain. Enga is real. It is an alien ruin of spires settled amidst dense fog, yet there are lights still ebbing through the city from a source of light at its center. The path to the city is heavily guarded by creatures placed here by Pius Augustus himself. He wished to keep all potential intruders out. There is still power here that could impede his plans. The 9 massive ritual pillars. They were used ages ago in a summoning ritual, which led to the city being overrun with Chaturga's monsters. In the right hands, those ritual pillars could cause Pius and Chaturga immense trouble. Maximilian Roivas manages to bring down one of these lesser guardians, but he knows that he's out of his depth here. If he remains, he will die. So he decided to venture back up into the mansion to study and seek help. But it took a grave toll on Max's sanity and his health. Nigh worse yet, no one believed him. One terrible night 3 months later, Max went into the large single room where the house servants slept, and believing them all to be possessed by Chaturga's beasts, he killed them. It was a bloodbath carried out by a man with little sanity remaining. Maximilian was taken to a sanitarium and locked away. Though he spoke like a madman and was unpredictable, he too spoke the truth, but no one listened to Maximilian Roivas. He would spend the rest of his days here as a prisoner, trapped in his own looping thoughts, and in death his soul would be denied rest. The next century and a half was spent in wait for Pius Augustus. The massive guardian beneath Oubliette Cathedral in France grew restless and tired of the flesh fed to it. Pius's minions feared that it would soon abandon its position as the guardian of the essence of Uliauth and return to its lair, but Pius believed that it would remain compliant so long as Chaturga wished it to be. The time of planetary alignment was less than a century away, the blink of an eye for beings as eternal as they, but they would need to find more bodies to feed to the greater guardian. The single sacrifices offered to it weren't nearly enough anymore. So, what if a war began? In 1914, Archduke Franz Ferdinand was assassinated, which triggered a complex series of events that led to World War I. By 1916, Oubliette Cathedral was converted from a church into a hospital. Over 19,000 men died every day in the trenches of Somme, which ran right through the Amiens region where the Oubliette Cathedral lie. The Guardian would have all the flesh it desired under the cover of the Great War. None suspected that the ancient cosmic gods could have been involved, but one young journalist named Peter Jacob had the honor of learning otherwise. Peter was a writer of clear talent. He wrote as elegantly as possible of the terrible things he saw on the front lines, while not censoring the brutality. Wounded soldiers taken care of within the cathedral felt as though it was haunted. Some noticed that during the day, no one was ever seen leaving. It was during the night that they simply vanished. One might rest their eyes beside a wounded comrade just to awaken the next morning and find that they're gone. Peter explored the hallways of the cathedral he was granted access to and took note of the many things he saw. When his leads ran out, he managed to fool one of the guards into abandoning his post for a bit so he could see what he was guarding, which turned out to be corpse storage. And here begins Peter's new life. Peter takes the gun sitting on the bench in the awful room, and as he turns to leave, the church is hit by a mortar, knocking out the lights, plunging him into near-pitch darkness. He feels around the room, finds the exit outlined by a faint blue light, but when his hand touches the door, Peter is taken to the pocket dimension of Mantorok, where the Tome of Eternal Darkness rests. When he touches it, so many faces and lives flash before his eyes, people familiar to us, but completely unknown to him. He, like all of Mantorok's chosen who came before, can now read and cast the spells documented within the tome. He's going to need every bit of magic and ammo he can find because Oubliette Cathedral has become a battleground of cosmic horrors. The nurses have been possessed, the patients are all dead or taken over, the soldiers are gone, and every bit of the church is occupied by monstrosities. With no one guarding sections of the cathedral anymore, Peter has full run of the church, if he can survive the trek. This place is evil. Peter Jacob's journey takes him through areas familiar from the stories of poor Anthony and Paul Luther. This young man has no idea that there is a massive terror living beneath the stone, or that it guards the essence of a cosmic god. What makes it so much worse for Peter is that while all of this is happening within the church, there is still a war zone just outside. The building is still under threat of being hit by something. Getting the lights back on does alleviate a bit of that fear. At least he can properly see the threats shambling towards him now. He solves his way into a hidden underground path where over 400 years ago, Paul Luther too fought his way to destiny. It's just as awful and infested now with Chattur'gha's creatures as it was back then. On the blasphemous altar where once was a diary page from the murdered brother Andrew, now rests a key. And on the bloody altar where the custodian was sacrificed, there's now a milky blue bottle that can restore his magical energy. He can feel the sorrow and despair soaked into the stone here, and he feels the broken souls that died calling to him for help that he cannot give. His venture takes him to an ornate door, one which Paul Luther stood before. Peter feels the same vile energy behind it that Paul too felt, and like the monk, Peter won't let his fear stop him. The young writer gathers his strength and goes through the door to meet whatever lie beyond, which is, of course, the Great Guardian. It does not outright smash Peter as it did Paul, but instead seals Peter into the room with itself, and then combat begins. The young man has come here with weaponry, and the Tome of Eternal Darkness has several powerful spells for Peter to use. The Guardian mocks his attempts to shoot and harm it, but Peter figures out this demon's trick. He's able to keep himself at range when recovery is needed. He rushes in to kill the minions summoned into the fight, and at just the right moment, while in close, Peter magically damages the creature with a powerful spell from the tome. It's a highly frustrating process that seems to fail half the time, but with patience, Peter inflicts high damage on Chattur'gha's devil. When the creature realizes what a threat this little being is, it tightens the arena, gives Peter less room to move around in, less chances to recover, and against all odds, this journalist, this young man, kills the Great Guardian, and the relic it was guarding is now his prize for the taking. Standing before it, Peter can feel the magics of Oubliette calling to him. He wraps his hands in cloth and he claims it. Peter Jacob will be its new guardian. He escapes Oubliette Cathedral alive. 36 years later, in 1952, another Roivas moved into the Rhode Island mansion that Maximilian Roivas once lived in. This man was psychiatrist Edward Roivas, and Pius Augustus noticed his presence quite quickly. He spoke with his master, Chattur'gha, to inform him of another Roivas being in the house, and quickly vowed that Edward Roivas would suffer such a terrible death that the rest of his line would never set foot in the mansion again. Edward had an interest in his family tree. He believed he could explain away the bizarreness of his ancestors with science, and the libraries of the mansion were filled with the knowledge he needed to understand their stories. He intended to solve the many mysteries of the Roivas line, and he approached it with enthusiasm. What Edward first found was a puzzle involving a clock. Long had it been unsolved, its hands missing quite deliberately. As he poked around his home, an actual ghost appeared before him. It was Maximilian Roivas, calling out to Edward by name. Max tells Edward of his sad death, alone in a cell, how he tried to warn the world of a terrible evil beneath the mansion. His regrets and anguish have empowered him to linger on here. He cannot pass on until he knows that the darkness has been stopped. He tells Edward to set the hands of the clock to 3:33. Edward finds the clock hands in books related to the Roivas family history, and upon placing them properly on the face of the grandfather clock, he is shown a secret hallway that Max built before he was taken away to the sanitarium. It leads to that hidden room his father Aaron had used, where he'd found the Tome of Eternal Darkness just out in the open waiting, and the same goes for Edward. There is no passing into the pocket dimension of Mantorok. The tome is simply there, waiting for him to pick it up. Maximilian orders him to take everything here, to use everything here. It is humanity's only hope, and he wishes for his death to be avenged. Edward takes the revolver, stowed away in the room, and picks up the book. He is shown flashes of lives and events from every user that came before him. Then he is gifted a spell to add to the tome. This was all the work of Maximilian Roivas, laid out with the clarity of a madman. It's not known if others besides Elia had done this, but Edward reads parts of the tome, and while he may not know everything that came before, he does learn of Pius Augustus and his deeds in the Forbidden City long ago. He knows that Pius is the one who chose the essence of Chaturga, that he's been working as an agent of the Ancient One for 2,000 years. Having this knowledge gives Edward a large advantage in what is to come. He's armed with knowledge. Edward needs to find a way under the house, to investigate what exactly is down there that so terrified Max. While he goes, he will now have to contend with the minions of Chaturga, intent on stopping him. Almost all the employees around the mansion are killed or taken over. The worst of them is a vampiric demon that attacks those who are isolated, then flees to heal itself once a challenger confronts it. Edward tracks it all throughout the mansion, doing his best to save lives as he goes, eventually cornering the beast in the basement. It was the perfect spot for their final confrontation. It wouldn't be able to flee from him anymore. It's a messy fight between them that involves a lot of blood, kiting, and dodging. Edward destroys the blood obelisk that has been healing the vampire and finally delivers a true killing blow to it. Beneath the obelisk was a ladder, leading down to what looks like to be an old water well. Edward descends it, and just like his ancestor Maximilian Roivas did nearly 200 years ago, he looks down upon the corpse city of Enga. He can plainly see the 9 great pillars surrounding the city, which served in some sort of a summoning long ago. If he is to destroy this place, then those towers are the key to it. He knows that the guardian creatures of the one called Chaturga roam the streets, and though it makes him shiver with fear, he presses on. Edward fights through the guardians on his path. All of them feel like a fight to the death that he barely takes victory in. But within a strange room, he finds pedestals that he believes look like the ones Pius had encountered in the Forbidden City, where the essences of the ancients rested. And then beyond those are portals to the 9 great pillars surrounding the city. He recognizes the arrangement of them from the tome. They form a circle of power. He goes to each of the towers and he inscribes a rune for destruction. He knows that Chaturga is weak to Uliauth, so he will use the magics of Uliauth against the beings in the city, remove the magic from it, kill everything within. If he can pull this off using the magic from the tome, it will be like setting off a bomb. Going from tower to tower takes hours of running and fighting. It is by far the longest stretch of danger any have faced who have possessed the book. Edward Roivas faces down the horrors of Enga while keeping his sanity and body intact, and when the final rune is input, he can feel incredible energies being pulled from the center of the city. The spell was being cast. He had to run for his life to get away from it. He bypasses everything that tries to stop him, sprinting back to the water well under his home. If he can get back to the mansion, he might be safe from the magical energies collecting. At the site overlooking the city, he can't help himself though. He stops to watch the towers discharge their energies, and an unstoppable force cascades through the streets, killing all of Chattur'gha's creatures, but keeping the buildings intact. Like Peter Jacob, Edward Roivas will survive his part in this story, at least for now. He did not leave the Roivas estate or try to forget the terrible things that happened in Engar. He did quite the opposite, in fact. It became his meaning in life. He studied his family history, the tome, learned all he could about the Ancient Ones, their essences and their desires. He did so knowing that one day, the planets would align and a war would begin. We move forward 31 years to 1983. Planetary alignment is estimated to be 17 years away. An archaeologist named Edwin Lindsay took interest in the Angkor Thom region in Cambodia, where a massive temple ruin lied. The temple had been abandoned for hundreds of years, and there were dark stories about what happened there. Satellite radar imaging had discovered a hidden area deep within the temple, and Lindsay decided that he wanted to explore to uncover any truths that may still be there. Unfortunately, the Cambodian government wasn't interested in accommodating Lindsay's mission, forcing him to make his own way into the country and to finance it all himself. A man named Paul Augustine helped Lindsay get into the country, and you get one guess as to who Paul Augustine really was. Pius has spent hundreds of years trying to find where the heart of Mantorok went to. That girl, Elia, did not tell him what she did with it before he killed her. But now that Pius has found his way back, now that he has intel on a previously undiscovered area, he doesn't need Edwin Lindsay anymore. He tries to shoot the archaeologist in the back, fails spectacularly, then drops any further attempts at subtlety. Pius reveals his true form and calls upon the minions of Chattur'gha that have taken over this place to hunt Edwin Lindsay down. He, in the meantime, had an imprisoned old god to check in on and a heart to find. Lindsay fights his way through the first round of demons with little issue and then starts solving his way through the temple. The exit is open to him. He's not trapped in here like Elia was, but he is far too invested in seeing this through to just leave. And so Edwin Lindsay is chosen. He is taken to the pocket dimension of Mantorok and given the Tome of Eternal Darkness. At this point in the book's completion, only 4 others have interacted with it. Remember, the flow of time means nothing to Mantorok. He sees Elia, Anthony, Kareem, and Maximilian. It is his turn to use the powers within and to record his story. This temple was once a haven for Mantorok. Here he was worshipped as a god of fertility until the terror of his presence drove the inhabitants of the region to abandon it. The warden has himself become a prisoner thanks to Pius. Massive pillars were driven through Mantorok's body and a spell was cast to keep him bound to the bottom of the temple. Lindsay has no idea the grand reveal awaiting him in the depths of this temple. Well, if he can make it down there, that is. This place is just god-awful. Traps, monsters that stunlock and gang up, obscure puzzles, some requiring spellcasting. It's frustrating and just mean. Though Lindsay does happen to make a wondrous discovery, one that he could have completely bypassed. He adds a spell to the tome. A summoning spell for a small creature he can summon and control, and he recalls far, far back in the temple there being a hole in a wall that he couldn't get through. He was too big. He doesn't have to trek back there, but he decides to take his chances with it. And within that hidden room, he finds a very special spell-casting rune. Not red, green, or blue. It's purple. It has its strengths, but no particular weaknesses. It is the rune of Mantorok. Casting spells using Mantorok's rune won't always be advantageous, but, well, 90% of the time it will be. This is a huge find, which will be a great benefit to Lindsay and future wielders of the tome. Heals will be more useful, weapons more powerful and poisonous when enchanted, spells more defensive and damage dealing. And to think, he could have completely missed this rune. After hours of delving through this hellhole, Edward Lindsay makes the discovery of a lifetime. He finds the prison of the corpse god, and he fearlessly approaches. Pius creeps out from the shadows and taunts that Mantorok is not so easily controlled. Pius can no longer fathom a motivation beyond power, so Lindsay's rejection of that desire for control is just laughable to him. While Mantorok might be weak and confined, the one who protects his heart is not. A surge of power is discharged from the statue before the corpse god, killing the beasts of Chattur'gha and seriously harming Pius. The old centurion is forced to flee, leaving behind only a vague threat, while the purple light from the statue guides Lindsay to a door beyond Mantorok's chamber. Within, laid across another of the statues, is the withered body of Elia. She has been here for over 800 years, waiting for the chosen one of Mantorok to appear, trapped in the temple, hiding from the Dark Ones. Pius never suspected that the heart of the corpse god was literally inside Elia, and she tells Lindsay that he must take it from her, but he cannot touch it with his hands. It would kill him. He must take it to something called the Gathering of Light, and she shows Lindsay a flash of a house, the Roivas estate, and commands that all involved in this tale take their stand against the darkness. Elia pulls the heart from her body, and finally is freed from the confines of this temple. Edwin Lindsay complied with her orders. He put the heart of Mantorok into a case and he took it to Edward Roivas at the mansion in Rhode Island. With his part in the tale concluded, at least for now, Edwin Lindsay takes his leave. He has survived. 2 years later, in 1985, a very old Peter Jacob finds Edward Roivas in Rhode Island. He has protected the essence of Uliauth for almost 70 years, but it's finally time for him to pass it on. He tells his story to Roivas, knowing that it sounded like madness, but Edward believed him, and he had a general idea of what this thing was. He's had the heart of Mantorok hidden away in his home for 2 years now at this point. Peter asks Edward to keep it. This thing is a burden that he wishes to be rid of, which Edward gladly accepts. Peter will get to leave the estate a free man. His guard has ended. The rest of his life will hopefully be a peaceful one. He has more than earned it. The heart of Mantorok and the essence of Uliauth are accounted for. Presumably, the essence of Chaturga is in the possession of Pius Augustus, but what of Zelatath? The answer to that question would come in 1991, at the end of the Persian Gulf War. A Canadian industrial firefighter named Michael Edwards has found himself in the Persian Gulf, aiding in putting out massive, raging oil fires. Michael was an experienced leader when it came to firefighting, so when his gut told him that the fire burning at this particular oil field felt wrong, he listened to it and relayed it back to his commander. He said it felt hotter than normal, more chaotic and out of control, but he was ordered to continue with extinguishing procedures. In a matter of seconds, a pressure increase at the oil well cap triggered an ungodly explosion. When Michael woke up, he was deep underground. The blast had uncovered the long-buried pillar of flesh, and somehow he had survived the fall beside it. The rest of his team wasn't so lucky, though. For a moment, Michael despaired at the loss, and he inspected the pillar of flesh. It looked like it was made up of people, buried in a ton of concrete. Someone had been waiting for Michael, though, the spirit of Roberto Bianchi, the guardian of the essence of Zelatath in his death. He does not greet Michael. He orders him to take the relic, warns him that many have died for it, and commands that he take it to the ruins of Enga, to a gathering of light. Michael is shown the city and the Roivas estate in Rhode Island, just like Edwin Lindsay was, but Michael is a bit more skeptical about it. Bianchi doesn't entertain his doubt long, though. He again orders Michael to take it, to save them all. Michael takes the essence of Zelatath, carefully, so as not to touch it with his bare skin. With only one way forward, armed with just his fireman's axe and a light, he starts chopping his way through the infested labyrinth of the Forbidden City. Michael makes it through several hallways and chambers completely unaided. He relies on his own strength and axe for safety. It's not until he is deep into the underground that he is chosen. Michael Edwards will be the next wielder of the Tome of Eternal Darkness. It contains the spells and runes discovered by every single user that chronologically came before him. All their faces flash before him once he takes the tome. He is stacked with magic now, and he's going to need every bit of it. This will be the most brutal stretch of resistance ever faced by one with the tome. This is the Forbidden City after construction had been done on it to complete the Pillar of Flesh, and it's impossible to ignore how stunning the halls are. For housing such a horrific structure, the Forbidden City is a feast for the eyes. While some of it has declined to time, the traps and defensive measures meant to keep intruders out are well intact. And the confusing layout of the layers and paths makes his search for a way out all the more complicated. It seems to just take him farther and farther down, until he reaches a once fateful room. Two massive monstrosities are held back by a force field, standing in a room that once held 3 small altars. This is where Pius once claimed the essence of Chaturga, but nothing remains here now except his creatures. Michael uses magic to turn them against each other to get access to the room where there is a goddamn brick of C4 resting atop the once altar to Uliauth. Michael assumes that it's left over from the war, but a voice interrupts that thought as soon as he picks it up. It shows him the foundation of the Forbidden City, and it orders him to destroy it. He doesn't need to be told twice. It's a command easily accepted. This place is evil. It should be destroyed. Not far away in the depths, he finds the Centurion blade of Pius. It is permanently enchanted with the powers of Uliauth, perhaps done as a mockery to Pius long ago. That voice calls to him again, simply saying his name as he approaches the blade. It is a direct counter to the magics of Chattur'gha, but it's not for Michael to use. This blade is meant for another in the future, the one called the Guardian of Light. He must keep it safe and see it delivered to them when the time is right. At long last, Michael makes it to the foundation of the city. The arms of a great monstrosity attack him from the pit in the room, and he'd rather not see what they're attached to. He fends them off, enchants the explosives for maximum damage. He plants the C4, starts the timer on it, and runs. He has 3 minutes to find the exit. Michael Edwards dodges through every creature that steps in his way, running as fast as he can towards the surface. It's as though something is forming a path as he goes. Rocks falling down force him down one specific path. It guides him quickly back through familiar walkways to a ladder which takes him to a set of doors, which an escape ladder rests just beyond. With plenty of time to spare, Michael makes it out before the magically enhanced bomb obliterates the Forbidden City. This wasn't the end of things for Michael, though. He wasn't allowed a peaceful escape. He had the essence of Zelatath and the enchanted blade of Pius. He was hunted. He managed to hide and survive for a few years, but he knew that it was a matter of time. The Guardians were closing in on him. So Michael got into contact with Edward Roivas one dark night. In a lonely alleyway, he presumably delivered the relic and the blade, with orders to not open the package out in the open. The minions of Chattur'gha can sense it if it's not shrouded. Michael departs, saying that he has one more thing to do before the Guardians find him. It's not known if he did survive that night or what his final task was, but it was the last time anyone in this tale saw Michael Edwards alive or dead. The planets were aligned in the year 2000. The summoning of Chattur'gha was imminent, but Pius had something to see to before that. He'd once vowed to kill Edward Roivas in such a brutal way that none of his family line would ever set foot in the house again. He intended to see that promise through. 2 weeks before the planetary alignment, Edward Roivas was decapitated in his home. And to make sure a message was sent, the killer took Edward's head. It was as confusing a scene as it was terrifying. This man had only one living relative remaining, his granddaughter, Alexandra. And she was so young, just a college student, with a reputation for being obstinate and stubborn. But she was clever as hell and had her grandfather's imagination. The night he was killed, Alex suffered a terrible nightmare. She dreamt that she was being attacked by shambling dead. The call from the police woke her. She was being summoned to Rhode Island. She immediately flew out to attend to the matter, and she was calm about it, but devastated by the loss. Edward and Alex adored one another and shared a bond as the last of the Roivas bloodline. When she arrived, there were still emergency vehicles outside the mansion. Edward's body hadn't yet been moved. A detective on the scene showed her the murder site with a shocking lack of tact and asked if this was her grandfather. They still hadn't made a positive identification, given the lack of a head. She was able to recognize him from the blue gemmed family ring on his finger. The detective disclosed that there were no signs of a break-in, and the force used to remove Edward's head had to have been significant. There was zero evidence left behind. There was no clue as to where his head went. Alex vowed that she was not leaving Rhode Island until they found out who did this, but after 2 weeks of investigation, there was nothing. The police proved themselves to be incompetent, so she stepped in once they had given up. She suspected that there were answers to all of this someplace around the estate, so she began to search on her own. There were clues as to who her grandfather was in life all over what is now Alex's home estate. He was a quiet, solitary man who didn't have strong ties to anyone, really. He and Alex were fond of one another, but they weren't close. Alex knew that the strange puzzles and objects laying all over the place had to be investigated to unravel what had taken place here. and she very quickly finds keys carefully hidden away amongst the mysteries. How did the police overlook all of this? Before the sun has set, Alex has uncovered the secret hallway created by Maximilian Roivas to the old office of his own father. And atop the old desk are piles of old texts and a strange, ugly book. The rest of the room is equally as confusing. A shrine of candles, deliberately twisted works of art on the walls, paintings of foreign lands. She claims a gladius blade all her own. There are pages of writing framed that are incomprehensible. Everything feels devious and of ill intent. This is where her grandfather spent much of his time, poring over old arcane tomes. With initial curiosity satisfied, she focuses in on that tome on the desk. When she opens it, she's assaulted by a few flashing images, a large pillar, a terrible monster. It causes her to physically recoil, but she quickly leans back into the book and begins reading the words of Pius Augustus, the first to hold the tome, the first story recorded from over 2,000 years ago. He wrote of how knowledge changed him, how it will change whoever holds the book, and they must adapt to fear or die. Pius recorded the story of how he came to see past the veil of our reality and all beyond it. It gave him purpose. In life, in flesh and bone, he saw himself as a fool. His story is written with such clarity that the words come alive. It's easy to see every detail in his long-lost world. Though it lacks context, Alex comes to know the death venture of Pius Augustus, his journey underground into the Forbidden City, the trials he faced within, and the choice at the end. He entered into the service of Chattur'gha, not knowing what he'd done. His life ended, he became a lich, forever bound to the will of an ancient one. But with the finality of his life, Pius gained supernatural strength thanks to the blessing of Chattur'gha. Over the coming centuries, that strength would dampen, but Pius Augustus quite took to his new life. He celebrated his own power and reveled in the return of Chattur'gha. This opens up so many questions. What is a Chattur'gha? Is this Pius still living? What became of his scheme, and how does this involve her grandfather? It would seem that Edward Roivas removed several pages from the tome. There are no more stories within it. She will find them not in chronological order from date to date. She will find them as Edward understood them, in the order in which they were chosen by some cosmic force, a force that existed outside time itself, yet was bound to Earth. Alex grabs from the wall that previously incomprehensible page, and now with the tome, she can read it. It takes her ahead in time to 1150 AD to the story of the young woman named Elia, who hailed from present-day Cambodia. Like Alex, Elia was reading from the tome of Eternal Darkness. It was within the Angkor Thom temple that her venture began. She read a spell inscribed within, written by the lich Pius Augustus himself. It was a binding spell meant for the ancient being Mantorok, who resided within the bowels of the temple. The one thing all three of the primary ancient ones had in common was they feared Mantorok, who had no weaknesses to any of them. Mantorok existed outside of their games. Mantorok banished and imprisoned them. Mantorok prevented any of their returns. So for over 1,000 years, this Pius Augustus had created a spell to bind the corpse god beneath the temple, so he could not be a threat nor a bulwark against Chattur'gha. In his hubris, Pius believed that this would be the end of Mantorok. He believed the Ancient One would wither and die, but the corpse god knew that there was someone else in his temple. And when the spell was complete, Mantorok sealed the doors to Angkor Thom, forcing Elia to venture deep underground. Alex learns that Elia did make it to Mantorok, and that she was warned by Pius Augustus himself to leave this place, to escape with her life. When alone, Elia was infused with the power of Mantorok and chosen to be a guardian of one of his hearts. Alex comes to know that this heart carried the power of the corpse god, and that Elia harbored it within her own chest. But poor Elia didn't make it. Her corpse would remain here, the heart of Mantorok hidden away within, and she would continue to guard it in death. Now, Alex understands a bit more of this mystery. She understands a bit more about this Chattur'gha, Pius, the Ancient Ones, and their fear of Mantorok. Mantorok must be the one who exists beyond the confines of time, the one behind the existence of the Tome of Eternal Darkness, but what's his end goal in all of this? Finishing this chapter of the tome causes a nearby altar of candles to ignite. Alex extinguishes them to discover a tube within which holds another page of the tome. Her grandfather planned all of this out very carefully to ensure that she found these pages in a specific order. The next tale out of the bending timeline of Mantorok is Anthony, the young messenger who tried to save the life of Charlemagne the Frank in 814 AD. These events take place 300 years before Elia's story, yet he will come to possess the book after her. Pius Augustus was over 800 years old at this point, and his powers were beginning to fade. Charlemagne the Frank threatened the chaos that he had been sowing in the world for so long, so the order to kill the emperor came down from Chaturga. Since this was over 300 years before the corpse god Mantorok was imprisoned in Angkor Thom, Pius still held deep concerns over him. It was known that one of his hearts had been entrusted to an undead servant, hidden away out of their reach. But Pius's master cared little over the Ancient Ones, or the threat of Mantorok, or the logistics involved in planning, which left Pius to do it himself, a task he happily tended to. The story of Anthony is the first time Alex reads of the events in France, specifically at the Oubliette Cathedral. Anthony's unwillingness to deliver a worrying scroll to Charlemagne caused the young man to be cursed, yet in true bravery, Anthony fought to save the emperor. There were signs of evil all around the church, clear indicators that Chaturga's beasts were near, and the monks who lived there were being terrorized by something unseen. And then, Anthony was chosen to possess the Tome of Eternal Darkness. He would be the third to do so in this warped timeline, drawing upon the spells discovered by Pius Augustus and Elia. Anthony's curse progressed quickly, so much so that it was clear he wouldn't survive the night. But with the time he did have, he fought valiantly through the halls above and below the Oubliette Cathedral. He made it to the depths alone, fought human agents of Pius Augustus who wanted the Tome of Eternal Darkness, faced off against mighty beasts, and kept moving forward even when his sanity was nearly depleted. But to his great sorrow, it was for nothing. Anthony did not reach Charlemagne in time. The emperor was killed, and he soon followed. From this sad tale, Alex has learned that the Oubliette Cathedral holds importance to the Ancient Ones, and that they thrived on, they needed chaos in the world. This was a scenario which Chaturga won. Alex collects herself, begins searching for the next page, and is stopped in her tracks by someone loudly hitting a door, or was it just her imagination? Then the walls start bleeding once she's obtained a key to the upstairs. She's starting to be impacted by all of this. She finds the next page in the second-level bedroom. It had clearly been hastily stashed behind a painting. But before she reads it, Alex searches the entirety of the second level and finds the ghost of a man standing in the hallway, staring at a wall. The unknown man looks directly at her, then walks through the wall where there seems to be an outline of something behind the wallpaper. Alex can't cut through the wall, but it's clearly a place of importance that she'll need to investigate. A nearby note insinuates that that ghost may have been an ancestor, Maximilian Roivas, and later in life something led him to truly despair. The next chosen in the timeline of Mantorok lived long before Anthony and Elia. Next was Karim, in 565 AD, the fourth to wield the book. His story took place almost 600 years after Pius Augustus's, but it was in the same place, the Forbidden City. His reasons for being there were, well, not wholesome or healthy. It was a game between two young people that wanted something from each other. Karim wanted Chandra's affection, and Chandra wanted Karim to find a treasure for her. That treasure ultimately turned out to be something cosmic and terrifying, the essence of an ancient one, Zelatath. Alex knew that Elia was a guardian of the heart of Mantorok, and Pius had claimed the essence of Chaturga, but now she knows that Zelatath and possibly Uliath too have essences on Earth. Reading through this chapter, Alex begins to feel the taxing mental effects of all this. Her grandfather appears in this vulnerable moment. He acts quite strange. He's affectionate and reassuring, but in an off-putting way. He plants into her mind that when her sanity is low, he will be there as a helper. He will keep the darkness away, he claims. Karim was a great warrior to have made it to the chamber where the essences were held, and were it not for the interference of Chandra's ghost, he may have actually touched the essence of Zelatath. That would have given Uliath the advantage in the power struggle. Chaturga would have killed Zelatath, Uliath's greatest threat, and then Uliath would step in to kill Chaturga. But Chandra prevented that from happening. In death, Chandra and Karim would be together forever, and they would serve as the guardians of the essence of Zelatath, ensuring that none would come to possess it unless chosen by fate, or rather, chosen by Mantorok. So, where is the essence of Uliath? The gravity of war between the Ancient Ones is beginning to settle. All these relics must be accounted for in the present day, but Alex's grandfather clearly laid these stories out like this so she could gain a deeper understanding of something. She can't cut corners. She can only search for the next page. Time is against her in this. She doesn't know how imminent Chattur'gha's return actually is, and her sanity is suffering greatly with each story told. The walls continue to bleed. She hears her dead grandfather over the phone. There's knocking on doors with no one there, and it will only get worse with time. Each page Alex finds not only reveals a story, but fills out the spells within the tome. She too can cast them, and some are required to reach places within the house. She finds the next page hidden away in the pantry behind a magical seal tucked inside of a spice jar. When it's in her hand, she sees Pius Augustus once again standing before Chattur'gha, delivering him news. He speaks of something called the Pillar of Flesh being constructed. The Master of Chaos, Mantorok, is assumed long dead at this point, and soon there will be planetary alignment allowing the Ancient One to return. A great leap forward in time has taken place with this chapter, and Pius's words lack context for her, but no good can come from something called the Pillar of Flesh. The next page Alex reads is dated 1760 AD, and it's the story of Maximilian Roivas. Prior to Max owning the property, his father Aaron resided here, and though Aaron's story was left unrecorded in the tome, it directly tied to his sons. Somehow, Aaron Roivas and an associate had come to possess the Tome of Eternal Darkness, though if it was merely a copy was speculated. Regardless of whether or not it was, it possessed the same knowledge and power as the original tome. The end of Aaron Roivas' life seemed to be fearful and chaotic. He could not read the book, and in the end, he hid it away in his secret office. It was only a matter of time until his curious son found it. Max was not taken to the pocket dimension of Mantorok to claim it. All he had to do was pick it up, and his fate was sealed. He saw flashes of lives that he did not recognize, hailing from varying eras. Max could read the book, and the letters he found written by his father in regards to it drove his investigation. But once Max had the tome, the creatures of Chattur'gha began invading the mansion, attacking Max and killing the servants. Aaron Roivas had written of Chattur'gha himself, of an entire city called Enga beneath the house, the same house that Alex was in right now, and there was a secret passage to it in the basement. Max cut and shot his way through the mansion. He found the passage and descended into the depths to uncover the secrets of his father. The outskirts of Enga were madness. Magic casting was required just to reach it, and he was confronted by a horrible lesser guardian of Chattur'gha at the gates. After barely dispatching it, Max decided to leave the city to seek help, to tell civilized society what was taking place under his home. But no one believed Maximilian Roivas. Just 3 months later, for reasons not made entirely clear to Alex now, he was placed into an asylum where he spent the rest of his sad days alone, screaming for someone to listen to him. Alex has now collected all the pieces of this grand puzzle, but she can't quite put them together yet. There are still a few stories she needs to read to fully understand how all these lives are interconnected. She finds the next page upstairs, in a dresser that was sealed with a magic rune which she may now unlock. A revolver sits atop it. Picking up the page, she sees Pius speaking with Chattur'gha about the past 700 years. It has been over 7 centuries since Pius cast his holding spell over the corpse god, since Elia stepped in to serve as the guardian over the heart of Mantorok. Pius discovered that the heart was still at the old temple someplace, but he could not seem to recall where it was. Under the name Paul Augustine, he would hire a renowned archaeologist named Edwin Lindsay to act as his guide, take his information on the hidden areas of the temple, and by the month's end, they would finally possess the heart of Mantorok. Edwin Lindsay survived the attack from Paul Augustine once they were at the temple. He didn't flee when Pius revealed his true form, and he continued to search despite the terrible beasts of Chattur'gha that hounded him throughout Angkor Thom. Lindsay was chosen. He was taken to the pocket dimension and presented the Tome of Eternal Darkness. The statues of all who came before him on Mantorok's timeline lined the walkway, and he saw the flashes of each of their lives. But Edwin Lindsay took it all in stride. This was the discovery of a lifetime, and he was fully invested in seeing this adventure through to the end. It was Lindsay who discovered the mighty Mantorok rune hidden within the temple, which could have been completely bypassed and omitted from the tome. His calling as an archaeologist paid off wildly here, for he had to pass puzzle after puzzle to reach the bowels of Angkor Thom. And by the time he was there, his sanity was on its last leg, and he knew well that this was the resting place of the being called Mantorok. But when he finally reached the corpse god, he did not find a husk. Mantorok was still breathing and writhing. The Ancient One was not dead. Pius met Edwin Lindsay in the chamber, and the two fought about desiring power. Lindsay did not want to control Mantorok, and Pius thought him a liar. When Pius ordered an attack upon the archaeologist, the mortal man was saved. The power of the corpse god forced Pius to retreat, and Lindsay was led to the resting chamber of Elia's body, where for centuries she'd guarded the heart of Mantorok as a spirit. She warned him to not physically touch the heart. It must be held within something so physical contact is never made. And here, Alex learns of a gathering of light, which is said to take place at the Roivas estate. Elia gave him the heart of Mantorok, and she was finally freed from her guardianship. Lindsay did as he was ordered. He took it to Edward Roivas, who hid the heart in a bookshelf, and then the archaeologist went on his way. He survived his endeavor. He played his part, and it was possible that Lindsay was still alive out there someplace. Alex went straight to the bookshelf where her grandfather hid the heart of Mantorok away in 1983, and sure enough, there it was. This is one of the 4 great essences of the Ancient Ones. Could it be that the essences of Uliauth and Zelatath were here someplace too? The next page is found upstairs, behind a stained glass window concealed with a spell floating in the air. Touching it showed Alex someplace new, maybe a church of some sort. Pius and 2 men clad in black stood before a chamber. The Lich cast a massive spell, and from the earth, a great guardian of Chattur'gha appeared. He ordered the monstrosity to guard something, another of the relics. This must be the essence of Uliauth, the only one still unaccounted for. Reading the page, Alex knows the story of Brother Paul Luther in the year 1485. He had journeyed to the Oubliette Cathedral in France to observe a holy relic called the Hand of Jude, not knowing that this cathedral was infested with the servants and creatures of Chattur'gha, and that the relics advertised as being here didn't actually exist. They were meant to lure people in, as the great guardian below the church had a nigh insatiable appetite, and with each passing year, its patience lessened. There were still a few original church members that remained. They lived in fear of everything around them. The Inquisition was at their doorstep, ever a threat to even the most devout of men. And within the cathedral, there were deaths occurring, freak accidents, bodies mangled, unexplained disappearances. After Paul Luther discovered a body in the main hall of the church, he was put on the suspect list by the supposed head figure of the cathedral, who was, in actuality, Pius Augustus in disguise. He was put into confinement. An innocent custodian found and aided Brother Paul in escaping, and then he was chosen as the next wielder of the Tome of Eternal Darkness. With no other options, Paul Luther explored the spaces of the church. He discovered that the holy relics here were fake. He had to face down the animated husk of a long-dead Anthony whose life flashed before his eyes, and then he began uncovering secret passages that took him deep into the earth. This all had a huge impact on Alex's sanity. The ghost of her grandfather appeared again, not to comfort, but to terrorize her. But it was getting harder and harder to distinguish between what was and wasn't real. He said words that her grandfather would never really say to her, right? He wished that she had died with her parents. He told her that she was a burden, that he wanted to be done with her. It didn't keep her from reading, though. The tale of Paul Luther was a difficult one that ended in a violent death. He faced the guardian of Chattur'gha and was crushed. This tale ended in failure and tragedy. With the reading of this page concluded, a note drops out onto the desk. It was written by her grandfather. In it, he explains that he had faith in Alex following his paper trail, and that the hardest part of her journey was beginning soon. And a hint is left for her, for where to find the next page. Using knowledge she gained from Paul Luther's story, she's able to play a melody on a piano, which was acting as a hiding place. When the page is touched, Alex sees a landscape of sand and rubble, where clearly a battle has taken place, while a man with the voice of Pius speaks to a defeated foe. A foe that can see Pius's true form through his disguise. His reward for this was becoming the foundation for a pillar. Reading the page, Alex is taken to the story of Roberto Bianchi in 1460 AD. This artisan and architect was captured by Pius Augustus, who was posing as a warlord conquering the region. Bianchi was tasked with designing a massive monument that tunneled down into the sands and high into the sky, the Pillar of Flesh. Once the foundation for the pillar was set and an outline complete, Roberto was forced to travel through the Forbidden City to survey it. He was not a soldier, a fighter, a warrior. Roberto was a softer man, forced into a nightmare. He came face to face with and fought against the many creatures of Chattur'gha to complete his task. Roberto watched as the workers around the pillar were taken over. He killed them to save his own life, and every step in the Forbidden City took a toll on his sanity. Roberto Bianchi suffered greatly, but he made it through the structure. At the bottom, he met the ghosts of Karim and Chandra. Karim moved against Bianchi to cut him down as he would any other intruder, but his blade did not harm the architect. This was the chosen one Karim and Chandra had waited nearly 900 years for. The ghost was unable to cure Roberto's confusion, but he gave assurance that answers would come in time. For now, he had a great burden to undertake. Bianchi would be the new guardian of the essence of Zelatath. He was careful to not touch it with his bare hands, and in secret, he completed the last of his surveys and he took the essence back to the surface, along with his reports of demons in the foundation and areas that needed fixed before construction. Pius did not realize that the architect held the essence of Zelatath when they spoke. When Roberto spoke out against construction taking place, Pius seemed to take it a little bit personal. Roberto and the essence were made to be a part of the pillar. In death, he would continue to guard over it, and, like Karim, he would await the day that a chosen one would arrive to relieve him of this burden. There is a painting in this office of the structure described in Roberto's story, the Pillar of Flesh. Alex inspects the frame and finds a chapter page hidden within it. Once it's in her hands, though, she feels something odd. She feels like Roberto Bianchi's spirit is with her, helping her. It's a strange familiarity she's overcome with. But soon it's overtaken by a vision of Pius Augustus in a horrible underground cavern, butchering a man atop an altar. One of his servants informs him that the guardian of Chattur'gha hungers and the binding over it is weakening. Pius is certain that the Great Guardian will continue to comply with its orders, but he also knows that a solution must be found. The binding holding it cannot fail, but feeding it would require so many humans that it would surely attract attention to the area. The only thing that could conceal such activity would be a war. The next page Alex reads tells of that war. It's the story of Peter Jacob in 1916 at the Oubliette Cathedral in France. World War I is right at the doorstep. The sounds of battle rattle the church, and Peter Jacob was a young reporter who came out to the front lines to document the terrors of war. His writings set him apart from all others, for he wrote of an ancient force of evil behind the war itself. His findings within the Oubliette Cathedral were heartbreaking but perfectly human. Things went as expected until the power was knocked out, plunging it into total darkness. Peter Jacob was chosen. He was taken into the pocket dimension where the Tome of Eternal Darkness rested, and he claimed it for himself. It contained so much knowledge at this point, so many spells, that Peter Jacob stood a chance against the forces of Chattur'gha. In his search for the truth, the young writer fought his way through the church and solved its many mysteries, just as Anthony and brother Paul Luther had done hundreds of years before. Neither of them had survived to claim the essence of Uliauth being guarded deep underground. Could Peter? His journey was heavy with combat and riddled with difficult obstacles. It was a terribly slow, time-consuming journey. During this tale, the spirit of Alex's grandfather again appears to act very, very creepy. He says he's waited centuries for her, that she belongs to him. But Alex sees through it now and sasses back that she knows what he is. She all but calls Pius out by name. He gives up the facade, drops the act, and mocks that she doesn't even know her own destiny. When he's finally gone, she turns back to the story of Peter Jacob and finds much of his experience overlaps with that of brother Paul Luther. The great change occurs when Peter finds the chamber of the Great Guardian. When the Goliath crawls from his hole, Peter Jacob starts shooting. He doesn't seize up in fear. He has far more spells at his disposal than Brother Luther did. He has modern weaponry, and the Guardian is starved. It's weak. Peter Jacob killed the Guardian and became the new Guardian of the essence of Uliauth. He would serve as this until 1985, when he was compelled to take the relic to Edward Roivas at the Roivas estate. It was a burden he was glad to be rid of. Alex is barely able to reclaim her sanity at the conclusion of this tale. The world seems darkly red and the sounds of crying echoes around the halls. She sees the ghost of a young woman in the library proclaiming that she can't get the blood out and leaves a key in the basement in her stead. She's read about the basement of the estate. That's where that hidden path to the city of Enga is, and that's a reality she hasn't had to face yet. There's still time until she will. The way down to the city has been covered by a massive device which Alex can't yet unlock. But the fuse box is down there. A room upstairs has been without lights because of a blown fuse. She repairs it and heads back upstairs to investigate what was within, half expecting it to be a shambling corpse or a mind-bending relic. But it's actually just a bathroom with a chest in the corner, containing a diary page of Maximilian Roivas and a medicine cabinet with another chapter page within. Touching it shows Alex the resummoning of the Lesser Guardian by Pius Augustus. This creature was defeated by Maximilian Roivas some time ago, but Pius has a new task for it: hunt and kill the current master of this house. But who could he be talking about at this unknown point in time? Pius would summon many more of these creatures, and he took news to Chaturga that all preparations had been made for his summoning into the world, and the alignment of the planets was just mere years away. And Pius vowed that the current owner of the Roivas estate would suffer such a terrible fate that the rest of his line would never set foot in the house again. That particular Roivas ended up being Edward, Alex's grandfather. The next chapter takes place in 1952, and it details a story about Edward. He was a young man newly settled into the estate, and he was excited to begin searching through the library to learn more about his family line. He quickly found clues to an unknown puzzle, and within the main reading area of the library, Edward came face to face with the ghost of Maximilian Roivas. The two knew of each other. There were no introductions needed. Max showed Edward how to reach the secret office in the wall of the estate, where he was gifted the Tome of Eternal Darkness. Edward Roivas did not pass into the pocket dimension to obtain it, but he would be one of those chosen to read it and record their story within. Max commanded he take all his old research and use it to save the world, along with an order to destroy the Lesser Guardians in Enga to avenge him. Edward Roivas came to know the stories of all involved in this sordid tale, save one. One more would come after. Edward fought through the mansion to find his way into Enga, armed with an arsenal of powerful spells and his choice of weaponry. He even managed to bring down a dreaded vampiric creature in the basement, and he beheld what Maximilian Roivas saw long ago, the corpse city itself. But Edward came to know this scenario with far more information than Max did, and he was better equipped to handle what lay before him. He recognized that the 9 massive pillars around the city were acting as a focus for magical energies, and that if he changed out the runes, he could copy a destructive spell from within the tome and destroy Enga. Edward Roivas traveled to every single great pillar, changed out the runes, fought the creatures of Chaturga, and blew Enga to high hell using magic. News of the loss of the Lesser Guardians in Enga troubled Pius, who despaired that they may fail as a result. But Chaturga did not fret, for he had seen in a vision that he would consume Zelatath. He made no mention of Uliauth, however. He simply commanded that Pius continue as though nothing were amiss. A note left behind by her grandfather guides Alex towards the final page. He tells her that he left a surprise for when things went awry. He left her his favorite liquor. There were several barrels of it in the basement, and she is welcome to help herself to it. It's not really the time for drinks, but she heads down anyways and finds the old man had put a pickaxe between the barrels. Oh, upstairs there was the outline of a door in the hall, but it was plastered over. She didn't have anything to break through until now. It's one of the last big mysteries of the house. Alex bolts upstairs, trips out from low sanity in the foyer, snaps out of it, rushes to that hallway, spots the door outline in the wall, and starts swinging. Within that room, Alex sees the true reason behind Maximilian Roivas' imprisonment. After his journey into Enga, he became paranoid and frightened. After 3 months, his descent into madness led him to kill 4 of his servants that once boarded in this room. All of humanity will become this if the Ancient Ones are allowed to return. In the center of the room, now amidst a pile of bones, is a stethoscope, which she can use to crack into a safe in the basement. And beside that is the final diary page of Max. He confesses to why he killed his servants. He began to hallucinate that they were creatures of Chaturga. He believed that he was doing the right thing, killing them in their sleep. He was trapped in that madness and imprisoned for the rest of his life. The mansion is now being invaded by the monsters of Chaturga. It's Alex's turn to fight them off. Within that safe are answers to so many unknowns. It contains the essence of Uliauth, a letter from her grandfather, a crankshaft which will allow her to unlock the secret room in the mansion's observatory, and the final chapter page. Upon picking it up, she's shown Pius Augustus once again. A servant tells him that a storm of fire and metal is approaching, that many young souls will be there soon. It sounds like a battle is soon to take place, perhaps a war. They intend to use the souls from those who die for a ritual which will aid in the eventual return of Chattur'gha. The note from her grandfather is the revelation of Alex's true mission here, and it's absolutely terrifying to read. Edward knew that Pius wanted him dead. He also knew that soon he would be dead. His mission for Alex was to finish what Maximilian Roivas ultimately tried to achieve, collect all the essences together and summon an ancient one that can defeat Chattur'gha. In this case, it would be Uliauth. She would need the power of every artifact to make that possible, for Pius was far more powerful than she could ever be without them. But what the note fails to speak on is what to do after Uliauth is summoned to Earth. It is something that she'll have to have faith in. Alex will do as her grandfather asked and see to the summoning of the Great One, Uliauth. Perhaps the final chapter page will have more information. Alex reads it and learns the story of Michael Edwards in 1991. Michael was a Canadian firefighter working in the wake of the Gulf War to stop the violent fires taking place in the region. His venture took him into the Forbidden City, where a massive explosion in an oil facility killed his entire team and left him stranded underground. The ghost of Roberto Bianchi knew that Michael was the next one chosen to guard the essence of Zelatath. He gave orders to take it to the Gathering of Light and showed Michael the Roivas mansion. It had to reach that estate before the planetary alignment. It was the final relic needed to complete the eventual summoning of an ancient one that could oppose Chattur'gha. And Michael was skeptical at first, but he complied with Roberto's request. He took possession of the essence of Zelatath, recognized that this forbidden city he was in was evil, and he blew it up. He survived his adventure, but Michael Edwards knew that something was going to strike at him from the darkness. There would be consequences for him. He managed to make it to Rhode Island, to hand the essence off to Edward Roivas before Pius and his agents got their hands on him. Ultimately, the fate of Michael Edwards was left unknown. The heart of Mantorok and the essence of Uliauth are both in Alex's possession, but where is the essence of Zelatath now? What did Alex's grandfather do with it? Well, that answer comes quickly, almost as if pre-planned down to the second. Using that crankshaft from the safe, Alex discovers that the observatory telescope doubled as a locking mechanism for the device covering the entrance to Enga down in the basement. The mansion is still full of monsters that she'll have to fight through, but this is almost certainly the final stretch of her journey. And as for the missing essence of Zelatath, a ring at the door is followed by a package being thrown into the foyer. Inside is the essence of Zelatath and the enchanted blade of Pius Augustus found by Michael Edwards during his adventure. With the relics of the Ancient Ones, the Tome of Eternal Darkness, and now a permanently enchanted Gladius, Alex fights to the basement and descends into the Corpse City. Alex gets to stand and behold the sight her ancestors too witnessed in their times. She sees the Corpse City Enga, now devoid of light thanks to Edward Roivas. Because of his writings, Alex understands that the 9 great pillars around the city can be used as a giant magical focus. Her grandfather used it to destroy what was within the city. She can use it to summon. Just traveling through the halls of Enga require magic spells. Everything here will be out to get her, and Pius has seen to more guardians and monsters being brought back into it. Alexandra Roivas repairs the broken altars within the main chamber of the pillars, places the essences of the Ancient Ones onto them, with the heart of Mantorok taking the place of Chattur'gha's relic, and then she goes to all of the pillars and inputs the runes for the highest level summoning spell contained within the Tome of Eternal Darkness. It took her all throughout the city, a venture that took hours of running, fighting, spell casting, puzzle solving, all the while knowing that if she failed, humanity was doomed. When each rune was input, alone in the heart of the Corpse City, Alex began the summoning ritual, which meant traveling to where Pius Augustus resided. His own grand summoning has just completed. It was a spell that took over 2,000 years to cast. Chattur'gha would soon descend on Earth, and Pius was confident that she would be the first one he consumes. Yet, while Pius has been working towards this for 2,000 years, so too have the many people who stepped forth to play a part in ultimately stopping him. 11 souls who were chosen, who worked, who sacrificed for this moment to be possible. While these two are ready for combat, so too do Chattur'gha and then Uliauth in the cosmos. these battles will overlap. Pius Augustus is physically weak, but a powerhouse of spellcasting. The fight arena for these two is small, making it hard for Alex to avoid his physical and magical attacks, but the Lich is not the true target here. The Red Claw of Chattur'gha is. It is keeping Pius immune to damage, so it must be destroyed. When Pius has to stop to focus on his casting, she bolts past him for the essence and strikes it with her blade, which is infused with the magics that Pius and Chattur'gha are both weak against, the magical energies of Urliauth. And eventually, others step in to join Alex in the fight. First, the spirit of Elia awakens within the pocket dimension of Mantorok, and through where the Tome of Eternal Darkness once rested, she takes Alex's place for a short time to get her swing in at the essence of Chattur'gha. And now the essence will teleport around the room, making it hard to locate, all while Pius Augustus chases her around the arena. Soon, Anthony steps in to hit the essence, and then Kareem. Meanwhile, in the cosmos, Chattur'gha and Urliauth are tentacles deep in their own fight, with Urliauth's magic holding the clear advantage over the raw strength of Chattur'gha. The next to strike the essence of Chattur'gha is Maximilian Roivas, then Brother Paul Luther, followed by Roberto Bianchi. The ones not present in this fight in spirit are the journalist Peter Jacob, the archaeologist Edwin Lindsay, firefighter Michael Edwards, and Alex's grandfather Edward Roivas. When they have all had their chance at the essence, it's left to Alex to finish the fight. Meanwhile, in the depths of space, Urliauth destroys Chattur'gha's literal claw. With the essence of Chattur'gha out of the fight, Pius can now be dealt with. He's no longer immune to physical damage. They enter the final stage of the fight, and the only opening she can get on the Lich is when his back is turned while casting, or just after he's completed one. Otherwise, he swings his staff in a massive arc, and his destructive spells will seek her out if she stops moving. He once had the blessing of unmatched physical strength from Chattur'gha, but that faded over the centuries and was replaced with magical abilities. The spells assembled into the tome from the many who came before Alex are her saving grace. It takes a staggering number of hits, but Alexandra Roivas brings the once eternal Pius Augustus to death's door, and far away in a cosmic arena, Urliauth cuts Chattur'gha into pieces. The first of the Ancient Ones has been destroyed. Pius assures Alex that the darkness she is fighting is not so easy to destroy, and that his death is only the beginning. It wasn't the final words that one might have expected. What could possibly come after all of this? At his death, Alex is accosted with visions of an alien world where humanoid figures are being used in some terrible scheme, subjected to a strange technology that she cannot comprehend. One who was missing from the fight, Edward Roivas, emerges from his resting place in the pocket dimension and passes into Earth. He calls to his granddaughter, telling her that they must bind Urliauth to some place outside this universe. He changes the summoning rune on one of the 9 massive pillars of Enga to that of a binding spell, and Urliauth is thrown from the cosmos into the nothingness of another universe. They have succeeded. They've saved humanity from the ancients. Edward's spirit, the real one this time, is finally able to approach and speak to Alex. He assures her that they have succeeded and that he is so proud of her, just like he knows her parents would be. He expresses sorrow that this burden was placed onto her and bids her a proper goodbye. But Alex's heart is not at peace with this. She has seen beyond the veil of reality, like Pius did, and knows that there are other Ancient Ones who could lay waste to the world just as easily as Chattur'gha could have, and they hunger to return. They'll never stop trying to get back, and it's only a matter of time until one of them succeeds. She has also seen Mantorok, who, for quite some time in this story, has been quiet. Remember, he's the one who exists outside the stream of time, whose reach extends to other universes, to other dimensions, where these same events are repeating. In death, Edward Roivas realized that his family line and all who interacted with the Tome of Eternal Darkness had been manipulated by the Corpse God. He subtly used them all to fight his enemies, while he suffered in his tomb with binding spikes through his body. In 3 realities, Pius chose different allegiances. And in the story just told, he chose Chattur'gha, in another, he chose Urliauth, and in the last, he chose Zelatath. What Alex and Edward both have come to realize is that Mantorok manipulated these realities so that the 3 Ancient Ones would destroy one another thanks to the meddling of humans. We only saw one of those fights, but they would overlap and happen simultaneously. made possible by the ingenious and patient planning of the corpse god. He would remain in that tomb in Angkor Thom, slowly dying still but planning his next move. With no one to oppose him, at least not currently, he was the victor. The last one standing was Mantorok.